Is Now membership live. We are live on thepowerisnow.com, and we encourage you every day to join us from 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to 11 o'clock, and sometimes even to 12. It just depends on the conversation, what's going on. We are talking about everything from faith to family to finance to real estate to interest rates to home buying strategies to REO. You name it, folks, we are talking about it. Go to thepowerisnow.com, and on the menu bar, you'll see live television, right? Television. Click on that, and that's where you'll see the whole agenda, everything we talk about. And of course, you got to be a member of The Power Is Now, and I encourage you to do so. Become a member. It's $10 a month or $60 for the entire year. And as a member, you get subscriptions to all of our magazines. We have a national magazine. We have a HUD Homes magazine of every HUD home property in all 50 states every single month. We have a real estate magazine. We have a television magazine that highlights new shows that are coming out, what they're all about. In fact, it's an e-magazine, so not only can you read about the show and the person hosting the show, but you can watch the show within that magazine. It's pretty awesome. And then we have, of course, access. As a member, you have access to all of our TV shows, our podcasts, and our TV shows, which are downloadable on all mobile apps and all for podcasts and mobile apps for television from Apple, Roku, Fire TV. So we are a full-fledged media company, but we go an extra step to engage our members, our subscribers, to talk about our singular focus here, and that is housing and home ownership and all the ancillary things surrounding that, like family and marriage and relationships. I mean, these things are the reasons why we buy homes, right? To raise a family, to have a place of our own where we can bring our friends and we can build a life. So I encourage you, if you're watching right now online, you cannot participate on a social media channel. If you're watching on Facebook, LinkedIn, what have you, you got to go to our website. You got to go to thepowerisnow.com. You have to become a member, and I encourage you to do that right now. Do it right now. Become a member right now and join the conversation. Again, my name is Eric Frazier. This is The Power Is Now. And folks, we're about to get into a special taping today of the Eric Frazier Show. My good friend, Henry Cascio, is joining me today. And so we're going to get started with that. We hope that you'll join us right here on The Power Is Now. Welcome to the Eric Frazier Show, where we talk about faith, family, and finance. My name is Eric Frazier. Thank you so much for joining us today. And I am just so excited about diving into my favorite topic, and that is marriage. Joining me today is my good friend and co-host, the great, the fabulous Henry Cascio, married also for a long time, 22 years, always ready to share his experience, his real life experience in marriage and raising children. And Henry, it's always great, man, to have you on the show. How was your Thanksgiving?
Well, thank you, Eric. Always great to be here. It was a good Thanksgiving, man. Real simple. Nothing crazy. You know, we stayed home. We invited a few family members. We ate way too much, I'll tell you, and just enjoy the day. But I guess the only action we really came to was when we play a game sequence. And man, let me tell you, we play against the ladies, and they absolutely destroyed us. 5-0. It wasn't even a competition, but it was so much fun. You know, we had a great time.
I love Thanksgiving, man. That has to be my favorite holiday. And when my family gets together, man, we put on a feast. I'm talking turkey and ham and prime rib and brisket and mac and cheese and sweet potato pie and all kinds of fixings, man. I mean, we also ate way more than we should have. And I love us getting together, praying together. We sing a couple songs. It's really my favorite time of the year. In many respects, I think Thanksgiving has preempted Christmas because Christmas, of course, an important, day of coming together with family and friends. But, you bring in the gift giving and all the stress associated with people getting gifts and that kind of thing. And it takes away, at least in my humble opinion, of the spirituality. I find more spirituality and I don't know, more of an emotional connection with family on Thanksgiving. It's also Thanksgiving is a time of reflection, right? And just in your life and on your family. And Christmas is also a time of reflection. It's more of a spiritual reflection of kind of where we are in our relationship with God and also in family. But I think that I could make a case, Henry, that Thanksgiving has preempted the spirituality and the family aspect of Christmas.
Yeah, I think Thanksgiving does a lot of things, right? It slows us down from the madness that we go through. And it's also very spiritual because it's a time where people really think about, hey, man, what am I thankful for? Right? Instead of they thinking about, man, I got to go to work, man, I got to do this, all the struggles that life comes. I got to pay this bill, I got to pay that bill. This actually the one time where people are saying, hey, what are you thankful for? And it forces us to think about what we're thankful for. And that changes everything, right? When you think about your wife and everything she's done for you, how thankful are you, right?
Come
She's
on.
giving you kids, she's giving you a home, right? She takes care of you when you're sick, right? I mean, at least when I'm sick, man, she's always there. You know, she does a lot of things for our family. And I think Thanksgiving is one of those special days where we really concentrate on the good stuff that is happening in our life rather than, being busy with all the other things that bring us not joy, but, bring us more headaches or worries or anything like that. So, yeah, I agree with you. Thanksgiving it's a great holiday. I love it. I appreciate it.
You know, um, what you said about being thankful for your wife really is a perfect segue into this topic today, and that is communication. I know that I don't say thank you enough to my wife for all that she does for our family. And that's a communication issue. And also too, when I'm sick, she'll tell everybody I'm a big baby, I am a big baby when I'm sick. And she is right there just taking care of me and making me rest, making sure I take my medicine, and getting me back to health. And so I tell you, sometimes I believe we just totally forget the power of the nurturing aspect of our spouses. And not just for us as husbands, but even towards our children. They are divinely made to be nurturers and caretakers. And we are so blessed to have them in our lives. I'm truly thankful. I am for my incredible spouse. Now, last time, and for those of you who are just tuning in or you haven't been following the series, I encourage you to go back to part one and then watch part two, because we're about to go to part three today here. Last time we focused on spiritual and emotional connection, how drift can really, impact a relationship and marriage, how the lack of worship and all these things, the lack of worship and just drifting from part, it could be work, it could be other interests, but just drifting apart and the lack of worship can cause a spiritual disconnect and weaken the marriage. And that's, I think it's a very common problem that exists in all marriages, whether you've been married for 1 year, just getting started, or 44 years like I have. These are things that you have to manage to. And so we talked about in our last session about inviting God into the marriage and what that actually means, uh, uh, and how you actually practice that. And one way to doing that is praying together and then also worshiping together. And also, finally, fighting the emotional and physical drift that can occur when couples get really busy with life, right? Life happens. Things at work, things in the community, things at home. You got all kinds of things going on. And I tell you, uh, that segment really impacted me. If you watch it, you'll see that I was repenting all through the segment because I'm just guilty of it all. Henry, how did that segment resonate with you?
Well, you know what? I'll be honest with you. When we talked about how easy it is to drift, not only emotional, but spiritually, right? And we do it without meaning to, right? It's not like nobody wakes up one day and says, "Oh, let me disconnect from my marriage, from God, from each other," right? It happens slowly, and we don't even notice it. And then when I thought about it, it's like, wow, can you imagine a man asking a woman to get married and that woman saying yes to that man, right? What it took to get there, how connected you were, like, and then not pay attention to what's going on in your marriage. It just happens, right? So it woke me up. And the first
Mm,
thing I guess what we have to do is, take advantage of the time that we have together to pray, to listen to worship songs or, invite God into our marriage, right? Into our home. Have very honest and meaningful conversations and about each other, right? Because if we don't, that's exactly what happens. And it creates such a gap without even us noticing it. And by the time we notice it, it's way deep and it may not be able to come back to a great relationship unless you really make the effort to seek God and ask for guidance. Because at the end of the day, everything comes down to guidance and who you're taking it from.
mm,
And who better take it from God? He's the creator of a marriage. He's the one that put you guys together and joined together. He knows exactly what's going on. And if you reach out to him, he's the one that can help you, and try to do it on your own and let your spouse see the change in you. Because once she sees that, or he sees that, it says, wow, what's going on here? And pray to God that his heart or her heart changes as yours is changing. So if God isn't in the middle,
mm.
we just end up trying to do marriage on our own terms. And none of us were designed to do that alone.
No, we're not equipped to do it alone. It is not our institution. It is a divinely appointed covenant that only God can create, and I believe that God maintains it because you said something earlier that if you allow this disconnect to go long, you may not be able to come back to, the relationship that you really want. And there is a risk there, but I believe that that's an individual decision. I think if two people can get aligned with their relationships individually with God, then I think it's only then can they come together and fully restore. Because I don't believe that God does anything halfway. I think that if you are allowing Him to be the center of your marriage, then you can forgive, you can forget, you can come together, you can completely restore that relationship that you have always desired. That's if you desire it. See, because I think if it doesn't happen, it's because you don't desire it. And if you don't desire it, then there's something wrong in terms of your communication and your relationship individually with the Father. That's what I believe. I don't think that nothing is unforgivable. I don't think that nothing is unredeemable. I don't think no relationship cannot come back from the brink of absolute desire. And I believe that because God does everything. He is capable of raising the dead. Come on now. Raising the dead and causing the blind to see. I think he can fix a marriage. Don't you agree?
Oh, definitely, right? But when you say you, it's got to be both,
That's
right?
right.
Right.
That's
Because
right.
when I've seen a lot of marriages, not a lot, but a few where they dissolve and one is really trying to do everything, but the
Hmm.
other partner, it's already gone. The one nothing to do with God. That's what I'm saying. It You don't let it go to that point.
Yeah.
Because if that woman or that man took you as a husband or wife, they had to be a connection. They had to be communication. They had to be something so big for you guys to say I do, right? And if you let it go so much, hey, you know what? One of you, it just takes one of you to want nothing to do with God. They get to the point where I'm done. So what can you do at that point? You got to pray and
Mm.
pray and pray. But if both of you come together and say, okay, God, help us out, seek his wisdom, his guidance. Yeah, I agree 100% with you that as long as both of them want to make it work, they have to come to that decision, right?
Right, right.
It's like salvation, right? Salvation, I got to say, you know, I got to say I believe in him, right?
That's right.
Is
That's right.
individual. So
That's right.
that's why I said, don't let the gap go too far.
Yes. Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and I believe that it is collective, because marriage, that's what marriage is, right? Two people coming together. But the foundation of a strong marriage is their individual relationship with God. I think that's why the scriptures talk about not being unequally yoked. You have to make sure that when you're picking a spouse, that she's operating under the same spiritual and biblical principles that you're operating on. She believes in the same God. She adopts the same spiritual principle for life and godliness and happiness and joy and peace. I think that if you can't be aligned there, then you are not even going to you're dead from day one. There is no real marriage if two people aren't. I mean, because keep in mind, as you stated earlier, this is a covenant relationship, an institution created by God, established by God, maintained by God, and the communication that you have with one another, the respect that you have for one another, and the humility that you both demonstrated to say to one another, "I'm willing to lay aside my hopes and dreams, and you're willing to lay aside your hopes and dreams for your individual quest in life to create new hopes and dreams that are with that we can both support and be one together and live until the Lord calls us home." And I think that communication is what we're going to be talking about today. This is part three of the series, and it's about communication, respect, and humility. And I like to refer to that as the trifecta of marital bliss. And I can tell you, after 44 years in December 19th at 11 o'clock, just reflecting on my own marriage, when things were really bad and rocky, and I'm telling you, just ugly, communication was at the root of it, absolutely the root of it. And respect, the disrespect at the root of it. And then pride. Oh my God. Wanting things my way or she wanting things her way at the root of it. So communication, respect, and humility, the trifecta of a marital bliss. And we're going to refer to the Apostle Paul in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15. And, he did it. The fourth chapter and the fifth chapter really talks about marriage and that whole dynamic and that relationships. And what always challenges me, Henry, is the parallel he draws to, Christ and his willingness to die on a cross for our sins. That's the kind of love that we ought to have for our wives in Ephesians chapter 5:19, really 5:25, 23 to 25. The whole fifth chapter, you should read it. But let's look at Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15. The Apostle Paul says, speaking, instead, he says, instead, this is from the New International Version, instead, speaking the truth in love, we grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of Him who is the head, that is Christ. And wow, that's a short verse, but it is powerfully packed with some wisdom here as it relates to marriage and relationships. And a couple of key words here that I think that are critical to a marriage relationship. It first would be the truth. Paul says, speaking the truth. Truth. I mean, man, I have to tell you, man, having been married for 43 years, I have not always told the truth. I have not always told the truth. And I didn't tell the truth because I didn't want her to get mad, or I didn't want her to know, and then because she found out, then I would hear about it. That kind of stuff. Not being completely transparent and honest, absolute clarity, absolute transparency. That's what truth means. And not speaking the truth, man, you just have put yourself on a highway to hell, man. Literally, a highway to hell, just not telling the truth. And then it's not just the truth, but he says speaking the truth in love, in love. And that really falls in the context of when you are exposing the truth in someone else, a truth about them, and you're doing so without that proper tone and disposition, that tenderness, or even the timing of it all, just inappropriate time. There is a time and a place to have those kind of challenging discussions around truth. There is a tone that one should have in communicating with their spouse that is appropriate and does not lead to escalation. There is a degree of tenderness that we should have in all of our communication, especially with our spouse. And Paul says, speaking the truth in love, we will grow. And it seems like those are the foundational aspects of being able to grow and to have, a healthy communication style, a communication style with your spouse that doesn't lead to conflict, but actually produces respect and perhaps joy, uh, that produces emotional, maturity in both of you, and just acknowledging that you each, are individuals and you have your own way of looking at things and seeing things and understanding things, and that is that's really the respect, because that's what he says. Speaking the truth in love, we will grow in every respect, and also with respect. That is respectful communication. Communication affects the way that our marriage functions. It either builds it up or it tears it down. And poor communication is the we'll call it the evidence of poor communication is a marriage that has been uh, that's breaking down. And it doesn't happen overnight. It happens little by little. The silent treatment. That's an issue of communication, not speaking to one another. And then when you do speak, because you're harboring anger or resentment, there's sarcasm in your responses to your spouse. And that doesn't lead you to anywhere but to escalations. And then because you're holding resentment, because the communication has not been there, then you're looking for payback. And so there's always some criticism about, something you're doing, and it has nothing to do with really what the core issues are, but finding and looking for criticism. And then the big one is withholding affection because the communication is not there. Withholding, not kissing each other before you say goodbye, or leaving the house, or not having any intimacy at whatsoever in the relationship. These are serious signs that communication is the problem. And perhaps the biggest one is explosive reactions. I'm talking from throwing things like, dishes and cups and glasses, to all out physical violence and hitting each other and cursing and just totally, allowing the conversations to get to such a a bad level where the communication is foul and it is not representative of either party. That's not who they are. And so the Apostle Paul here, man, I think in just a few words here, he's he's really laid it out what it takes. We have to be, mature, and we have to try to emulate the one who said yes at the cross and was willing to be the space for all of our weaknesses and all of our vices and all of our very utter sinful nature. He became the sacrificial lamb. He became the space for us just to be who we are. His death, his resurrection, his grace gives us right standing, unconditional love, and yet here we are, still full of venom and fire, and ready to fight. But we have him as the example that we don't have to be that way. We can choose another path if we really want and desire a kind of relationship with our spouse that brings honor to that relationships and honor to God. Henry, I know I'm saying a lot there, man, but that's how I see Ephesians 4:15 in the context of communication. Uh, it is critical. Respect, humility, all those things play into what Paul laid out here.
Yeah, Eric, what I understand when you read that and all your explanation is that every healthy marriage, we need truth in it, right? But truth delivered the wrong way can do a lot more damage than the problem we were trying to fix. So, what's the issue here? Communication, like you said, right?
Mhm.
How do we deliver something truthful the right way? So now we need to learn how to communicate, right? Because when we don't, what happens? We start arguing about small things that can be fixed by the way we communicate or by explaining something so simple that this shouldn't be an argument. But if we haven't learned to communicate, that's a big problem. Then yelling can start. Yelling can start because you get frustrated because you're not able to express or communicate the way you want to so your spouse can understand you. And the problem is even bigger than arguing and yelling is when silence comes in. You know, I think silence do a lot more damage because it seems like a rejection. Hey, I'm silent. I don't need to talk to you. I'm done. I'm over, right? So the other spouse that is trying to communicate, even if it's the wrong communication, is going to feel shut down, or is also going to, feel like, okay, I'm done too. And when that happens, it's totally broken because either one could start wondering or thinking about the wrong questions, asking themselves, is this really worth it? Am I here, just being roommates, right? So everything changes if you don't communicate the right way. So for me, the first step that I would do is when we have an argument, okay, I really have to check my heart, and probably give me some time because I have to ask myself, hey, if I say this, is it going to fix or heal what we're feeling? Or am I saying this to win the argument? Right?
Mm.
Because if you do it to win the argument, that's not communication. Communication is not about winning. It's about getting to understand each other. It's about understanding, hey, this is an issue. How do we fix it? Right? That's got to be the goal of any argument. Yeah, you can argue, right? If you don't see it the same way, but argue in a way where you're communicating your point, even if your spouse doesn't agree to it, she understands where you're coming from. It doesn't have to grow to a big argument, yelling, screaming. It just got to learn how to communicate properly. And that starts by asking yourself, okay, how do I say this in a way where my wife or my spouse is going to take it and try to feel or understand what I'm saying? So it takes work from you. It takes time for you to learn how to express yourself. There's uh, you always go to God, right? And you can go to your pastor, you can go to a friend, someone that is older than you, that's been married longer than you, that understands that all these things come up in marriage. And or maybe somebody that is a great communicator, right? Ask them, you know what? I have this issue. Like that happens to me. I don't feel like I'm a great communicator. And I always have to ask myself, man, I want to say things truthful, but I'm very blunt at times. But then I notice that that causes more problems. So I have to change my way on how to say, and that's learning, right? That's learning. Read something like the Apostle Paul, tells you how to love your woman. I mean, by saying this thing this way, am I really loving her? No, I'm not really understanding what you're saying. I just want to win the argument, then I'm doing it wrong. So there are ways to do it, but you got to take time, you got to take effort, you got to think about it. And first, you got to calm yourself, put your emotions aside, right?
Henry, man, I love it. I mean, that's some great stuff because it's so true. Sometimes we feel like that we have to respond right away. And that's our ego, by the way. Our ego, wants us to defend ourselves, our position, every single time at whatever cost. The ego seems like it doesn't even care about the relationship or about the other person's feeling. Ego just wants what it wants, right? But I think that taking the time to think about what your response is going to be before you try to share some truth or how you're going to communicate your truth about that person. I think it's so important because sometimes just time alone to think allows your emotions to come down, to it gives you space to really consider their potential response and how they're going to react to it. And time does have a way of just settling us and equipping us to think more deeply. Even the computer models, ChatGPT and Claude and all these platforms, they have now a deep thinking mode. So you can get an instant response and you can get a deep thinking mode. And if you look at the two, you'll find that the deep thinking mode provides a much more comprehensive, response to whatever your query was. And I think we do need to take the time. And I think that's a really good point. Take the time, check your heart, and think about what it is you want to say to your spouse. And is it going to demonstrate your love for her or your contempt for her, right? Is it going to demonstrate you care about her or you don't care about her? The other point you make, which I think is so important. No, nobody, and yours truly. I mean, I got married at 19, man. There was no manual, and my parents weren't a great example of what marriage should be. I mean, you really have to. If you really want to succeed in your marriage, you have to align yourself with couples who have been married for a long time. I would say at least 10, 20, 30 years, and they're honest about their marriage relationship. Because if they're not honest, it doesn't matter how long. There are people who have been married for 30, 40 years and they hate each other. They're there because of financial reasons. They're there because, economic reasons. If they could leave tomorrow, they'd be gone. All right. So time is not the only indicator that a marriage is strong. And so you need to know these people, this couple, and know that they're real and authentic, and be able to get some advice to share what you're thinking and feeling with others. I think that's so important, a great strategy, and just helping you improve your style of communication because the communication in the marriage is completely different than any other communication you're going to have. It is not the same communication you're going to have with your friend, your neighbor, your brother, your sister, your mom and your dad, your employer, your employees. It's not. It's a whole nother world. And there's no book. I mean, there are some resources. I'm going to share some actually. There are some resources, but you're not going to get a divine download from the Father above, when you say I do, or you jump the broom and you enter into this covenant. I mean, I wish he operated that way, Henry, that we would get some, all of a sudden, it's like, in the Pentecostal church, when they catch the Holy Spirit, they fall out or something. I wish it would be some type of download that we would get when we get married that would program us to have the kind of communication that is appropriate and that will sustain a marriage. But there isn't. We have to all learn the hard way. And you can make that hard way a little softer if you connect yourself with another couple that can help you in your marriage. And I think that it's so important that men connect with men who have been married for a long time. Women connect with women who have been married for a long time. And then there is a time where you both connect together and have those conversations. And I think iron sharpens iron. It does. And I think that that mentorship is everything in a marriage. And then the last thing I think that is so important is that we think about, how we're showing up every day. How are we show, how are you showing up every day? What is that real dynamic in that relationship? Eh, You know, are you treating your wife like she's your employee, that she works for you, that she owes you something? And or is she treating you that way? What is the dynamic going on here? And um, are you truly treating her and communicating with her like she is an actual partner, a real partner? And, this whole idea that relationships are 50-50. Um, you know, Many believe there's no such thing as a 50-50 relationship. Maybe 51-50. There's always got to be someone who's going to be the leader, who's going to have the final word, that kind of thing. And that whole idea, thinking creates a whole lot of additional issues. But the truth of the matter is, I think to describe a relationship with your spouse as 50-50 or 51-50, that, I'm the head and she is not the head, or, I think that it's an oversimplification of a very complex and spiritual relationship because the reality is you come together as a unit and you both have unique gifts and strengths. There's certain things you cannot do, and so you probably shouldn't lead in. And there's certain things she cannot do, and she probably couldn't lead in. I know some couples right now where the wife makes all the financial decisions because he is just not, he doesn't have the aptitude and or even the desire really to manage and pay all the bills and set things in order that way. And the wife has the experience, the education, and she's like all on it. And they're doing well because of her due diligence. And so a lot of relationships, kind of drive who's in charge by who's managing the money. And money is it's like it's number one in terms of areas of divorce. So this is great stuff here, man. We could continue on it. Let me give you one final strategy, and I'll let you give the final word on this. Here's a strategy that I implement in my marriage when I come into, we'll say, discussions, whether I have an issue or she has an issue, and that is the 2-minute rule. And um, it simply means allow the other person to speak. Allow the other person to express themselves uninterrupted and truly listen, truly listen. Sometimes we listen for the attack, or we listen for the accusation, we listen for the problem that they have. And the truth of the matter is, we shouldn't be listening for anything other than to get an understanding of where the person is coming from. What is the challenge? What is uh, the opportunity that she or he may be presenting, so that you are absolutely clear. You can't get clear unless you be quiet and listen uninterrupted, and then ask questions, get clarification, and then don't be in such a rush to respond right away. Give yourself space, ask for permission to think about it. You've said a lot here, honey. Let me just really think about this, meditate on this for a minute. And can we come back together later tonight or tomorrow and really and continue this discussion? I mean, this isn't an ideal scenario. You have the cleanliness of theory and the messiness of reality. Sometimes even being that way depends on the other person's emotions. It could still escalate, but just being quiet and listening and getting an understanding and being patient with the person in terms of their expressing themselves. And then when they're done, you don't respond by saying, "Are you done yet?" with sarcasm or with you know, with your failed attempt at humor, because it sends another message that you don't really care and you're not really listening and you don't really want to work this out. That's what it sends when you have those inappropriate, sarcastic responses. Are you done yet? Can I speak now? That kind of stuff. It just means you're looking for a fight, and it's a fight you're not going to win.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the 2 minute rule and everything you explain, it's you will see how much healing can happen, when your spouse feels like, she's being hurt, right? That you're actually listening. Because at the end of the day, speaking hard truth with love, right? Like the apostles say, it's not about you being a perfect human, right? We'll never get there. But it is about being intentional, right? How's your attitude, right? Are you being really intentional to solve whatever little issue it was that caused that big problem? Because usually our small things that cause a huge problem. And, when you do that, you choose that connection, right? Over your pride. And by choosing that, you're getting to the heel, right? To everything is gonna be fine. But it has to be talked out. It has to be communicated. It won't it's not really about you being right or your spouse being right. It's about getting to that place where you both understand each other and you know what you got into this marriage for, right? To create a family, to live together. So you got to change whatever whatever is happening at that moment, right? Whatever the problem is with your communication, take it to a love place, take it to God, take it to a place where both of you are reminded why you chose each other as spouses, right?
Man, on that note, folks, we're going to take a break. This has been a great first part in part three. And we're going to deal with disrespect next, folks. Disrespect. Oh my God. Disrespect or contempt. That's what we're going to talk about when we come back after this commercial break. You are watching or listening to the Eric Frazier Show, where we talk about faith, family, and finance. Hang in there with us. We will be right back.
Everyone knows the power of social media and the impact a strong online presence has in this day and age. But most real estate agents simply do not have the time to manage all the advertising and marketing details, and that's where the Power Is Now Media steps in. We are the answer you have been looking for. Let us help put your brand on the map. We will create customized graphics for weekly full-page ads, social media content, video, and podcast content for you. Sound complicated and expensive? It is affordable and easy. We have the best experts on the job. Go to thepowerisnow.com and find us under the VIP Agent tab to learn more. This is the future of real estate. Join today. Thepowerisnow.com.
And we're back. For those of you just joining us, welcome to the Eric Frazier Show, where we talk about faith, family, and finance. And folks, we've been on a journey talking about marriage and how to have a long marriage, a successful marriage, a sustainable marriage, how to survive your marriage. And truth of the matter is, nobody really wants to survive their marriage. They're trying to thrive in their marriage. No one wakes up one morning and says, I want to get divorced, or they wake up one morning and say, I hate my spouse and I just want out of the situation. These things happen slowly. They grow. It's like a cancer. It literally is like a cancer. And just like cancer, if you catch it early, you might be able to survive it. You might. But if you wait and you don't go get checkups, you don't do your mammograms for women, you don't do your prostate screening for men, you wake up one day and you find out you have stage 4 or the highest level, and you have days or months to live. It is done. It is over. There's no coming back from it. Now, I want to believe that that is perhaps the one aspect of problems in a marriage that is not true. I want to believe, because God is the founder and creator of marriage, that all marriages, regardless of where they are, as long as you are breathing and there is breath in your lungs, there's a heart beating in your chest, you have the right activity of your minds and limbs, that you are conscious of the presence of God in your life, keeping you alive, and that you are aware of his sacrifice for your life, that his forgiveness of your sins is totally unconditional, then I believe that every single problem marriage can be redeemed and fully restored. I believe that, and I will go to the grave believing that. I think anything outside of that is just an excuse born out of selfishness and pride. And I know there's a lot of people maybe watching and listening won't agree. You know, there's just certain things I just cannot come back from. You know, Eric, man, he was unfaithful, or Eric, he did this, or Eric, he did that. And I'm telling you that if we were to begin to count all the sins that we commit every single day by commission and or omission, if we would begin to lay out the crimes of humanity that God just totally just said, you know, it is done. It is finished. I will be the lamb. I will be the covering. I'm going to forgive them all of their sins, and I'm not going to lose a single one of them. You are forgiven by the grace and by the blood of Jesus Christ. You are forgiven. You not only are you forgiven, but you maintain a standard, not a standard, but right standing. I mean, there's nothing you can do to separate you from the love of God. That's if you believe. Nothing you can do to separate you from the love of God. The Apostle Paul articulates that so beautifully. There's nothing we can do to separate ourselves from the love of God. And yet, the Apostle Paul in chapter 5 of Ephesians, it draws that parallel between a husband's love for his wife, and I believe the inverse is true. A wife's love for her husband should be like the love that Christ had for the church, that he was willing to die for it, sacrifice his life for it, use his blood as a final sacrifice for all sin, all time, once and for all, that we can have right standing with him. And so for me, that's the foundation to this entire discussion, Henry, that, I mean, there's nothing that, you know, with God, nothing is impossible. And you can have the relationship you desire with your spouse. But it starts with you, the individual, and it starts with her, the individual, and your individual relationship with the Father. And until you get that straight, you're never going to have any kind of relationship with anyone that's going to last. I honestly believe that is the key to all relationships, whether it be in business, whether it be in marriage, whether it be your neighbor. It doesn't matter until you have that kind of relationship that will, with God, that will enable you to have horizontal relationships. All of your relationships are going to be a problem. You're going to just be a walking problem everywhere you go. You're going to bring chaos and confusion. And we all know people who are like that. That's everywhere they go, they leave a trail of chaos, confusion, heartache, disappointment, because they're not aligned spiritually. So in the last break, we talked about, communication and how it's so important that we understand that it is the trifecta of a marriage, a marital bliss. You have to have the right kind of communication. You have to have respect for your wife, and you have to have humility. And that leads us to the second part of this discussion, and that is disrespect or contempt. And the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 12, verse 10, and this is from the New International Version, he says, "Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves." Be devoted to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. When we talk about disrespect in marriage, we have to understand that there are different levels of disrespect. I mean, it really does come in different levels. If it starts small, it's almost unnoticeable at first. You have to be kind of sensitive to whether you're being disrespected enough or being disrespected, because it can be a slight, it could be very, very small, almost undetectable, unnoticeable. It could be a sharp tone or a dismissive comment or just the lack of patience that the person is having with you. These are small and sometimes unnoticeable signs of disrespect. And we choose, in many cases, to let those moments go unaddressed, right? We do. And then because we let them go unaddressed, they grow into something more destructive. And at the extreme end of the spectrum is absolute contempt. Absolute contempt. And contempt isn't just irritation. You're irritated. It's not just frustration. You're frustrated with the individual. Contempt is when one spouse begins to view the other as inferior or foolish or just unworthy of their presence or attention. It shows up through eye rolling or sarcasm meant to wound the person's character. Or it shows up in mocking or the kind of, a kind of emotional superiority. It's a posture. Every study in marriage philosophy, Christian or secular or clinical, agrees that contempt is perhaps the most significant predictor of divorce. When you have such contempt, that contempt can even lead to rage because it destroys the foundation of honor that God commands in Romans chapter 12. Be devoted, he says, to one another in love. Honor one another above yourselves. I mean, the opposite of honor is contempt, an absolute contempt and hate, if you will, for the other. And when honor is absent, that contempt just continues to grow. And when contempt grows, the connection, if there's anything left, has completely died. And so when you look at Romans, really, Romans 12, I tell you, it is, in fact, the entire chapter of Romans, and also 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and chapter 12. I think honor is really perhaps an underemphasized, understated thing that exists in marriage, honoring your spouse. And that's what it means. To be devoted to one another requires a level of respect and honor for that person, to devote yourselves. And it's beyond, an emotional commitment. It really is. It is how you view them. Honor one another is to esteem the person, to truly value the person. And above yourselves, as he says here, means you're willing to humble yourselves, not to lose your identity, not to be something who you're not, but to allow the other person to shine, to allow yourself to be the conduit for de-escalating issues that may happen. Humility, I think, is perhaps the foundation of honor. When you honor someone else, you are demonstrating humility. And so contempt at the other end of it is talking down to the person, rolling your eyes, embarrassing the person in public, treating, others better than you treat them. One of the things, Henry, when I'm angry or when there's challenges in my own marriage, and my wife gets on the phone with a friend or someone, and I'm listening how she's communicating with them, and I'm thinking to myself, what, why don't you talk to me that way? Why are you, I mean, from the greeting to the salutation at the end. I mean, it's just like a loving and fun conversation. And yet, as soon as the phone hangs up, it's a completely different vibe and communication because we're both angry. And neither one of us have the honor and respect we should have for one another. And that's where the breakdown in communication takes place. And so, as I'm thinking about this and really meditating on Romans 12, I see the weaknesses in my own behavior. And it's interesting, it's so easy to point the finger and to look at the actions and the behavior of the spouse, when truthfully, all you have to look at is yourself and see how you are the cause of it. You are planting the seed that is growing. You are reaping what you're sowing. And I think that until we recognize that the buck stops with us and that my behavior, my communication, my engagement, my level of interaction is not dependent or subject to how the other person behaves or think. It can't be. I've got to be driven by a higher authority, by the word, by the Spirit of God that He's placed in me to behave differently in spite of what other people might do or say. And I know that, it's easier said than done, the whole idea, the cleanliness of theory and the messiness of reality. Our flesh gets in the way. Paul said in Romans 7, with my flesh, I serve the law of sin, and with my mind, I serve the law of God. We know what to do, but sometimes our flesh gets the best of us, and we do what our flesh wants us to do instead of what our mind and our spirit is trying to guide us to do. He didn't make robots. We are free agents with free will.
Yeah, Eric, you touch on a subject that is very destructive for marriages, right? Because contempt doesn't just attack behavior, it really attacks identity, right? When someone feels contempt, the message they hear is very deep. They feel beneath you. They feel like they're not worthy of respect. They feel, man, like they're disappointing. And that's the reason why contempt is so dangerous, you know. But it doesn't just show up, right, out of nowhere. It's usually the result of hurt that was never healed, right? Or it's frustration that never got addressed. And it slowly turns into an attitude of superiority, right? But that contempt rarely comes out loud. Most of the time it's really quiet, right? It shows up really quiet. And that's why a lot of people miss it at the beginning. But you got to grab it at the beginning, but we're not teach, right? Nobody teaches us that how it starts, how all these little things starts, and they make it huge. Nothing starts just all of a sudden. There was something that, or many things, like you mentioned, like the eye rolls, right? The sarcastic jokes, right? Something that doesn't build you or your partner up. Instead, it just brings her down or him down. It lands really heavy on the spouse. And that's why most people don't realize it, right? Because contempt grows in inches. Right? It's not in miles. It's the repeated little choices of this dishonor that is slowly chip away that relationship. I've seen a lot of couples that will never cheat physically, but emotionally, man, they tear each other down with their own tone, with their own expression, with their silence, with their own attitude, right? And over time, that kind of disrespect is just very, very damaging because it attacks the worth and the dignity of the other person that you promise to love. See, one thing I have learned is in my own marriage is that honor is not just about how I talk to her. It's about how I see my spouse, right? If I see my wife as my partner, a gift from God, someone that God trusted me to love and protect, then I got to be careful with my words, with my attitude, right? And I'm careful with how I speak about her in public, right? I got to be careful about not to embarrass her, not to correct her, in public, not to treat her like she's one of my kids or a co-worker, right? And this is what honor creates. It creates safety for your partner. She feels safe, right? And when your spouse feels honored, uh, their heart opens up. But if they don't, they feel mocked, dismissed, or talked down, their heart closes. And once that heart closes, what what communication can get in is so hard to communicate. It becomes almost impossible unless you start honoring your partner again and really looked at her like God wants you to look at your spouse. So if you want more connection, I think we should start with honoring our partners because honor softens the atmosphere, honor calms the room down, right? Honor makes space for love, right? And that's what you want. You want love in the middle of your marriage in your home.
Henry, that was beautiful, man. And you really brought it home. Honor is essentially how do you see your spouse? How do you view your spouse? And do you see her as, your true partner? Do you respect her for what she brings to your life and to your family? And the journey that you've been on or that you just begun, how do you honor your spouse? And so, um, with everything that Henry has said and what I've outlined here, folks, there is a strategy, right? And I call it the honor audit. So before we talked about, 2 minutes, 2 minutes of uninterrupted conversation. We're allowing the other person to speak. This is the honor audit, and that is once a week. And perhaps, depending on your circumstances, maybe you do it every day. Maybe you do it in the morning and again at the end of the day. But at a minimum, once a week, ask yourself, did I honor my spouse in my speech and communication with her today? Did I treat my spouse with courtesy and respect today? Did I respond to my spouse as the communication took place in the day or the week with humility or with ego, making her feel inferior or in some way? I mean, these are great audit questions we can ask ourselves because, like all things, what gets managed gets done, right? My favorite saying, Henry, is what gets scheduled gets done. If I don't put it in my calendar, if I don't write it down as a to-do, and I can't even rely on to-dos, I can have a to-do list. I can have 100 to-dos on my to-do list. But if none of those to-dos are actually scheduled to get done, they don't get done. So what gets managed, what gets scheduled, gets done. And so perhaps one thing you might want to do if you are struggling in this regard is to put it in your calendar, maybe once a week on Fridays, maybe every day, 8 o'clock in the morning while you're walking in the morning or you're working out in the morning. You do that audit every day, once a week, once a month, and ask yourself those questions. Did I honor my spouse with my speech and my communication with her today? Did I treat her with respect and courtesy? Did I respond to her with humility or with an ego? Am I, am I showing her that I love her and that I need her and that I value her opinion? I mean, it's a few questions you ask yourselves, and if your answer to any of those questions is no, then what do you do about it, right? The first thing you do is you get on the phone and you apologize. Do not let the sun go down on her wrath or yours. The first thing you do is as soon as you recognize or the spirit has convicted you of how you're communicating and how you're behaving, do not let a minute go by. Call her. And if she's in meetings, then wait until she's out of the meeting or go home or what have you, but get it right away. Don't let it fester and to grow into something more. All right. So we're going to talk about next another big problem in maintaining a great marriage, or not surviving a marriage, but really thriving in a marriage, and that is dealing with competition and ego. And we spoke a little bit about ego and how that makes the other person feel when you have one, but we're going to deal with competition and ego next. You are listening to or watching The Eric Frazier Show, where we talk about faith, family, and finance. And I hope that you have been gaining some insight today on your own marriage as we just kind of go through these very important issues in marriage. So stay tuned. We'll be right back right after this commercial break.
The Power Is Now magazines are the leading resource for real estate agents, mortgage bankers, entrepreneurs, and small home ownership businesses, providing leaders with business strategy information, resources, and tools through PIN, real estate, programming guide magazines. Stay up to the minute with real estate news and information from industry experts. Subscription is free. Sign up today. thepowerisnow.com. thepowerisnow.com.
And we're back. For those of you just joining us, welcome to The Power Is Now. We are actually live on The Power Is Now membership live. You can join it. You can actually, we've been talking about marriage, and we are open and available for anyone to join the conversation every day at 10 o'clock. Every day at 10 o'clock, I'm live, and for members only of The Power Is Now. And you can participate in the live taping of shows and of conversations we're having about real estate and other matters. And today we're taping a show called The Eric Frazier Show, my show, where we talk about faith, family, and finance. And today we have been really going deep on it. We've talked about a number of very important issues in marriage and some strategies to help you overcome those challenges. And the next one up is competition and ego. We're taking the topic of competition and ego from Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21, where the Apostle Paul says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Now, let's look at some key words here to help us, to guide us in this conversation. That word submit is very important. It means to yield, to listen. It means to cooperate. It's actually a military term, actually. Submitting doesn't mean that you're less than, but that you respect the rank and the authority and the position that the person has in your life or in your environment, right? And Paul says, submit, right? Yield, listen, cooperate with one another. And that is that one another is mutual. It's not a one-sided. There's something to be gained by the mutual cooperation. And you decide to cooperate with one another, to support one another in your united effort to move forward as a unit, right? And you do that out of reverence. And that is, the motivation is not ego or anything less like that. It's not carnal at all. The motivation is spiritual. We have perhaps the greatest example we could ever have in the person and the work of Jesus Christ. His willingness to sacrifice. I mean, that's the foundation to all of it. I mean, if you want to be a model for anybody, it's not anyone walking on two legs here on earth. It is the one who came and walked and has gone back, and that is Jesus Christ. And so we are to submit to one another out of reverence to our Creator, our Savior. Marriage is not based on competition, but is based on cooperation. It is a purpose partnership. And it's necessary in order for two people to walk together. They have to agree. They have to respect each other. They have to like each other. They have to love each other. And as I said like, you may not like an action, but you should like your spouse, right? You may not like what he or she did, but you should like and love your spouse to the extent you're willing, you're motivated to cooperate and to be in a loving partnership. And that's sometimes very difficult to do because we live in a very fallen world, Henry, where competition, I mean, it pervades every aspect of our life. I mean, from a young age, we're taught to communicate. We communicate and not to communicate, but to compete. We're competing in the classroom. We're competing on our jobs. We're competing with our siblings. We're competing with our neighbors. I mean, it just seems like competition has been a theme in just life. And unfortunately, it enters into marriage where husbands and wives are competing with each other when instead of helping one another. And that competition brings ego because whoever wins, what? Is better than the other person. Whoever wins is smarter than the other person. Whoever wins is faster, stronger, all these things, more handsome, more prettier. There's no end to it. Am I right, Henry?
Yeah. You know, when people, or especially couples or someone hears about the word submission, right? They picture something heavy or one-sided maybe. But you know what? Mutual submission, what the Bible really talks about, is actually one of the most beautiful and practical things you can do in a healthy marriage. But we got to understand what that means, right? And to me, it simply means we choose to put each other's strengths, needs, and feelings above our pride, right? Is it complicated? I don't think so, right? But it shows up in everyday things. Like, the first thing you should do is when we listen, we got to listen to understand, right? What they're saying, not listening to reload. So when my wife is sharing her heart and I'm planning my defense, wow, I'm actually listening? No, right? So when I'm listening to understand her, that's my submission. I'm submitting my urge to be right so I can understand her better. You know, also it's about letting strength lead, right? There are areas that where my wife, man, is clearly stronger than me. I can't even dispute that. Right? Organization, planning,
Right.
decisions with the kids, and instead of me letting my ego fight that, I honor it, right? And she does, if she does the same for me in the areas where I'm very strong, right? That's not weakness. That's what partnership should look like. That's what your marriage should look like. You submit to each other. The mutual submission means being willing to adjust, right? It's saying, hey, if this matters to you, then it matters to me. It's being flexible. It's choosing unity over winning at that moment. And honestly, one of the biggest signs of mutual submission is the ability to say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. I'll do my best. That simple sentence has saved me a lot of times. It saved probably more marriages than any conference or a book that is ever written, right? Because both, you and your spouse are willing to humble yourself. You know, disrespect has no place on the land, and pride. There has no room to grow. That's just going to destroy your marriage. And that's what people really need to understand what submission is all about, because that is another killer, a silent killer, right? It also shows up in little attitudes, little reactions, right? The need to be right, the inability to say, I'm sorry. So when you think about submission is, if you look at it biblically, a man has to submit to God, right? And if you're a godly man, there's no woman in the world that won't submit to you, because you'll be doing the right thing for her, right? You'll be honoring her, you'll be loving her, you'll be supporting her, you'll be taking care of her. Everything that the Bible says that a man should do in their marriage. So submission is not a bad thing, right? Submission is not about power. It's really about wisdom. It's about saying we're on the same team. Let's play to win together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is wisdom, recognizing that, you are a unit, you're a partnership, and that you each bring, unique gifts, talents, and abilities. And you put those all together, you cooperate with one another, and you lay aside your ego and you put away all competition, because it's not about competition. It's how do we move as a unit from point A to point B? How do we achieve our goals as a family? How do we achieve our goals in our marriage? How do we do that together? What do you bring to the table that I don't bring? Let's pull it together. And I think that is wisdom, and that is respect, that is love, that is cooperation. And submitting to one another is really shared leadership, is really how to define it. It's shared leadership. We're all leaders. Your wife is a leader. Your husband is a leader. And if we need to look at each other as leaders, leading our family towards an objective, whether it be with or without children, or just husband and wife in the marriage. You're moving together as one unit, and so you assign your your responsibilities by each person's individual strengths. Some person is going to be stronger in finance and dealing with money. Another spouse would be stronger in the parenting and discipline. Another one's going to be stronger in planning and organizing. It's not about ego. It's really about cooperation and mutual respect. It's not about tradition, because, you grew up in a household and your dad, did everything, ran everything, and had the final say on everything, or your mom did everything, ran everything, and had the final say on everything. You can't, unless you were, in the bedroom with having those conversations which you were not privy to, unless you were, had been with them all the time and they actually shared with you the plan in their marriage. You have no idea on why your parents operated the way they did. And if you think you do, it is because one example, that example may have led to some other challenges or may not have. It doesn't necessarily mean that tradition in itself has to dictate how your marriage should function. Your marriage should function out of mutual, loving respect for each person's individual talents and abilities, and recognizing that they are not your employee, they're not your subordinate, they are your equal partner, equal in every respect. In fact, some might argue that with the woman's ability to bring life into this world, they may even be greater. But, Paul is saying here, submitting to one another, respecting one another's unique gifts and abilities. And that, I think, is what is really the only solution to keeping competition out and ego out of your marriage, because it will destroy your marriage. Um, the next key point, and we're going to go into that, Henry, for the sake of time, and is kindness. And this can really lead, this is really kind of born out of that mutual respect. The lack of kindness. This is another big issue, a big issue in marriage. As I don't know what happens, Henry, where couples just stop being kind to one another. And I mean, if you just think about it, you can cite 100 different examples of where you experience a lack of kindness with your spouse. So the text is Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32. That's where we're going to draw this main idea of not having kindness in your home, the lack of kindness in your home. And so the apostle writes, he says, be kind, passionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as Christ God forgave you. Now, this has been kind of a reoccurring theme for me throughout this whole series, because, you know, it is the sacrifice of Jesus Christ that is the motivation for how we show up every day and engage with other people. And Paul says, be kind, be compassionate to one another, forgiving one another. And so let's look at that here. Kind simply means gentle and courteous. You know, and it's not that difficult. I could tell you, when I'm not kind, it's ego. If I'm speaking to someone or behaving in a manner that is not kind and courteous and considerate, I am mind driven, ego driven at that very moment. It's about me and how I'm looking and feeling, or how I see myself, the authority or superiority over that person. And it's just flat out wrong. I don't know if there's ever an excuse not to be kind to another person, whether they're your spouse or not. Unless you are facing a violent situation, you're being threatened, that's a different matter. I'm just talking about in the general course of showing up every day and engaging with your spouse and engaging with people, be kind. And how difficult is that? The truth is, it's not difficult. We choose to be unkind. We choose to not be gentle in our approach with people. Same thing with compassionate. Paul says, be kind and compassionate. I mean, we choose not to have empathy for another person's situation. Instead of having empathy, we say, you know, well, that's what you get. Or, you know what, too bad for you. You shouldn't have did this. You shouldn't have did that. You know, or this is what happens when you do this and when you do that. I mean, some people look for opportunities to throw salt on the wound or to step on people when they're down. They have zero compassion, no empathy, no patience with people. That's another thing. Compassionate means not just being empathetic, but being patient with people. Not everybody's going to run at the speed you run, right? Talk at the speed you talk. Think at the speed you think. You know, get things done at the speed you get things done. You know, not everybody's going to see things the way you see things. And it's so often that as human beings, we immediately judge people and treat them differently if they don't see things our way, if they don't do things our way, if they don't, you know, respond the same way we respond, if they don't have the same interpretation of actions of others that we have. They get angry and they lack any compassion whatsoever, and they don't even want to continue the conversation. I mean, this is how arguments begin, not having respect for other people's point of view and how they see things. And then Paul says forgiving. I mean, well, that goes without saying. I mean, thank God for grace. Lord have mercy, Henry. I stand, man. I lay down. I wallow in the grace of God, man. Seriously, I wallow in the grace of God. There's nothing about me that's redeemable. Nothing. Nothing about me that's redeemable. You know, in fact, Paul said, there's none good. No, not one. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I mean, we all need daily grace. And how is it, especially for believers who know this, understand this, are completely, utterly dependent upon the grace of God, how is it we don't extend that grace to other people? I just don't get it. In fact, I mean, I'm convicted every single time I don't extend grace to other people. I don't care what it is. The Spirit, man, the Holy Spirit convicts me. I mean, David says the Holy Spirit, is written in our heart. The Word of God is written in our hearts, and it convicts us of sin. Before there were any pages of inspiration written by the early priesthood or by the apostles, the Word of God and His Spirit and His presence in our lives convicts us of sin, convicts us of wrong. We know it intuitively, instinctively, we know it when we're not extending the grace that He has extended to us to others. As Christ forgave you, He says in the scriptures here, we ought to forgive others. God is He is the example, He is the mode of how we should be operating. And when we really think about this, there are just very, very small acts that can transform the emotional climate that we create in our homes, in our workplace, just very small acts. It doesn't take, you don't have to be Mother Teresa and go live in an impoverished area and feed the poor. I mean, it takes very small acts to transform and change the environment that you bring to every relationship, every situation. Because let's be clear about that. You are bringing an environment. You are bringing a climate. It's like if I go to Texas right now, all right, I'm going to deal with the weather there. And if I go to Florida, I'm going to deal with the weather there. And I go to Washington, I'm going to deal with the weather there. And I come to California, I'm going to deal with the weather. Wherever you go, you're going to deal with the climate and the environment there. When it comes to relationships, you don't have to go anywhere. You are the climate. You bring that climate, you bring that environment with you. And so you choose to create the environment that allows for compassion and forgiveness and grace and kindness. You create that. And the small acts that can help you create that would just, having a softer tone and your communication, being grateful, saying thank you and expressing your gratitude, doing small favors for people, and not having been asked. Touch, is some way to show kindness. From, the handshake to the touch on the shoulder, where appropriate, of course. And the last thing, Henry, you said this, man, and I agree. Saying I'm sorry. An apology can go a long way. I think that just saying I'm sorry transcends every book that is ever written on relationships. Just saying I'm sorry. Any counseling sessions, any therapy, I mean, if you could just apologize, that can go a long way in having a better relationship with your spouse.
Yeah, when I think about being kind, what does that really mean, right? How do you relate or how do you implement that in your marriage? You know, it's really saying, I care about how my words and my actions make you feel, right? That's a great way to see it. And when you look at kindness, I know it's a part of God's character. You see, how He treats us is with kindness. So why don't you bring that into a marriage? You know, it marriage grows when we treat each other with, the same way, with gentleness, with patience, with kindness, right? Most of us, I think, don't give the weight that kindness has in a relationship, especially in a marriage relationship. In my experience, kindness is one of the foundations that actually keeps our marriage healthy, strong. See, most marriages, they don't fall because of one big issue. There are a bunch of little issues, and kindness is one of them, right? They drift because kindness slowly disappears is the same as the other issues. It slowly comes in, right? and you start feeling cold or distant. And I think it's not really because the love is not there, but it's because we're not really expressing it anymore, and we need to understand that love is an action. We need to take action every day, you know. Unexpressed love will feel very unloved like, if you know what I mean, kindness in marriage, is really not that complicated. It's like you said, it's very simple. Well, simple saying good morning, right? You know, a simple quick text. In the middle of this, I sent my wife a text, right? I told her I love you because I got convicted of listening to you, what we're saying. You know, it's like you said, helping your spouse, doing something for her. Something, these are small acts. It may seem insignificant, but they can really change the emotional climate of the relationship. Because kindness is a great form of communication, right? That is kind of communication, is letting her know without you saying, "Hey, I see you, I value you, I love you," right? But there's a lot of challenges, right? Kindness becomes difficult when resentment has been sitting there for a long time. It hasn't been addressed, and then it shows up when something small hurts, but it's piling up, you know, from before. But this is where kindness becomes a healing tool. A small, consistent acts of kindness can begin softening the resentment that is there. It's not going to happen probably overnight, but if you keep doing it every day, slowly and steady, it will. Because kindness does a lot of things that are important, but one thing is it changes the pattern. When your spouse is used to tension or short responses, and all of a sudden you show gentleness or being thoughtful, right? It interrupts that cycle, right? And the heart notices the difference, you know. So be kind, be kind, love your wife. You don't break down resentment by force, you know. You melt it through being consistent, being kind every day. It takes just the little small things. Good morning, give her a hug, show her that you love her, right? That's why the Bible calls us to be kind and compassionate, because kindness is not a weakness, it's a really strength. And I had to understand that. Before I thought I was showing weakness, but it's really your strength under control. It's choosing to love even in the moments when it feels easier to defend yourself. It's just thinking more about that person, your wife. Think about this. It's your spouse, right? It's not just anyone. You talk about that sometimes we see our spouses talking differently to other people. My wife has told me that. Why don't you talk to me like that? Right? And I'm on the same boat and I hear it. And I think the one thing to overcome a lot of issues is through kindness.
Henry, I tell you, we can't do too many of these series because they're so convicting. My goodness, here you are texting to your wife, in the middle of this because you're convicted, and I'm doing the same thing, man. I am doing the same thing. I am so convicted. This is what I love about, being in the Word and studying and just being mindful of spiritual matters and spiritual things, because we can so easily, I don't care who you are, you can have been like me, married for 44 years, a preacher, been in the Word my entire life, or you could just be getting started. It doesn't matter. We can all just lose sight of who we are, what we should be doing, how we should be showing up. And this is why it's so important that we are in the Word all the time, daily. One of the things that I admire about the Muslim community is that they're praying 3 times a day, man. I don't care what they are doing. I don't care what they're doing. They are dropping to their knees or heading to the temple and praying 3 times a day. Now, I'm not saying you need to do that, but I'm saying that what I respect about that is their willingness to ensure that they are acknowledging God in every aspect of their life, every aspect of their life. In every aspect of their life, they are recognizing that He is just not something they do on a Sunday morning, right? We get the family together, head out, rush to church, sit in the pew for an hour, but they are infusing their faith in their daily life. Now, outside of that, I do not subscribe necessarily to what they believe about Jesus Christ, but I do respect their their desire to stay in that type of frequent communication. The other thing too is that I'm just reminded, the scriptures say, "Oh, taste and see how good God is." I mean, God is good, man, and He is continuing to meet our needs and bless us with everything. He's always kind to us. I mean, there's never a moment where we're not beneficiaries of the goodness and the grace and the kindness of God. And so we have such a wonderful example of how we should be treating our spouses and our friends and our neighbors and our children with the spirit of kindness and love and respect. I'm reminded of a story about two sparrows who were flying around a cherry tree, and they were eating cherries off the cherry tree. And one of the birds, a female bird, had clipped the branch and broke her wing, and she fell to the ground. Now, she was not injured to the point where she couldn't live, but she just couldn't fly anymore. And so she's on the ground, right? And the male bird is still flying around, eating cherries and saying, "I love you." They're two little lovebirds. "I love you, I love you, I love you." And she looked up to him and said, as if birds can speak, "But if you love me, you drop some cherries." And I thought that's a great point, and that is, love truly is an act. It is not words. We demonstrate our love to our spouses not by what we say, but by what we do. Every spouse probably every day is leaving to go to work or what have you, and they hear what? "I love you," and they maybe get a kiss on the cheek, right? Well, that's great. That's great how to start it because you may never see that person again. The way life is today, you're here today, you're gone tomorrow. So that's a great start. But what are you actually doing beyond that to truly show that you love your spouse? It is, Henry, as you stated, it is an act, nothing more, nothing less. And so here's a solution. If you're finding that you're not being as kind as you should be, I'm convicted by this, Henry. Uh, and that would be to let kindness be your first response. Your first response. I don't care what it is, what question it is, what the situation or the circumstances are. Before you respond to whatever the situation is, ask yourself, what is the kindest version of what I want to say? What is the kindest version of what I want to say? What is the kindest version of what I want to do? Ask yourself that question before you respond. Henry, this is a wrap of chapter 3, and I'm convicted, man. When communication fails, every issue feels irreconcilable, and you find yourself in court getting divorced for irreconcilable differences. But honestly, that it didn't happen overnight. It happened over a long period of time because you allowed it to happen. But when humility and honor and kindness return to the marriage, reconciliation becomes possible again. I really believe that because God is the author of this institution, that marriage is a covenant, I believe that nothing is impossible. All marriages can be restored. So, Henry, before we close the show, what is your final word to couples right now who are watching who may be equally convicted as you and I are as we have touched on this very powerful subject?
Well, we touched so many things, but if I could leave couples with one thought today, it would be this. There's no marriage out there that needs a brand new spouse. What they need is a brand new attitude from the same two people, right? We need to deal with it now. You're married now, you made a commitment, right, with your spouse. So you got to deal with it. See, marriage grows when both people make small daily choices, you know, listening before, reacting, speaking with honor, choosing kindness. You spoke about that really well, even when it's not easy. None of us get this perfect. Let me tell you that straight. I don't. I haven't seen anybody. But every day give us another choice, right? And you can get it close to perfect one of those days, one day a week, 2 days a week. That might be enough, right? And I want to encourage people out there, the couples. Hey, don't let pride steal what God wants to heal. Don't let that silence replace your conversations that are so much needed. You know, don't let the busyness replace that connection that you once had in order for you to marry someone, right? If something feels broken, invite God back into the center. Pray, do a simple prayer. Most powerful prayers, a married person can pray is, Lord, start with me. Let me know what I need to change, right? Let me know how I should be acting. How do I love my wife, right? So, and when you do that, or even better, you pray together, you honestly, humbly, I'm sure God can rebuild things you thought were gone. He softens hearts, right? He restores trust and bring peace back into the home. So don't give up. Don't assume it's too late. Choose one small act of love today and let God multiply it.
Henry Cascio, I love you, man.
Love it too, man.
Seriously, you bring such great wisdom to our discussions, and I'm so glad you have been co-hosting with me. And I want to encourage everyone, if you are needing assistance, you want to talk to somebody, reach out to Henry. I mean, married 22 years, he's very successful in life and in business. And if you can't tell by now, you should know already. He's very humble, very, accessible, and he's willing to help you. In addition, I mean, whether you be your marriage or if you're looking to purchase a home, he's a real estate broker. If you're looking to get financing for a home, refinance or anything, he's a mortgage broker. And he's a real estate investor. If you're looking to building a home or investing in real estate, Henry does a lot, man. And we are aligned in a lot of ways. I mean, I do everything that Henry does. And so we make a great team. And I'm so glad that he has partnered with me on the Eric Frazier Show. Henry, take a moment and just for those who are listening to the podcast and are watching, give your telephone number, email address where they can reach out to you.
Thank you. I'm Henry Cascio. My email is hc@ownitgroup.com. And my phone number is 714-920-4809. You can reach out, text me, leave me a message, give me a call, and I'm happy to help if I can help you.
And he will help you. Now, I think it wouldn't be right for us to end this segment because we're talking about some really challenging areas in marriage. And you may feel somewhat helpless right now, that you can't handle it on your own, that you need help. And so I want to provide some resources for those of you who are seeking help. I'm in Riverside, California. We're in Southern California. I live in Riverside, and I attend a couple of churches here that I would highly recommend you contact. The first is Crossword Christian Church, and that is Pastor Bishop L. Kurt Syke. He's a dynamic preacher. The website is crosswordchurch.org, and if you are watching this, it's on the screen. The telephone number is 951 694 8807. That's 951 694 8807. I also attend Harvest Christian Fellowship with Greg Laurie. And if you don't know Greg Laurie, then you know. I mean, the Harvest the Harvest Fellowship is incredible. And you can find harvest.org in Riverside, in Orange County. Go to harvest.org, and they have small groups everywhere. The telephone number is 951 687 6902. And both of these churches do provide counseling and support for married couples. And I would highly recommend you give them a call if you're looking for spiritual marriage counseling. Now, I also recognize that there are people who don't necessarily want, the church to be all in their business, and they would rather have someone that is outside of the church and able to address these issues. And there are some licensed therapist directories that you can go to and find someone like that. There's Psychology Today, and that's psychologytoday.com. There is AAMFT, which is you can go to www.aamft.org, and this is American Family Counseling and therapy. There's therapy for Black men, therapy for blackmen.org, and therapy for Black girls, therapyforblackgirls.com. And there's faith-aligned counseling services where they're not necessarily tied to any particular denomination or group. There's focus on the family. You can reach them at 855-771-4357 or go to focusonthefamily.com. And then there's Faithful Counseling. You can go to faithfulcounseling.com. These are faith-aligned counseling organizations. And then there are online telehealth counseling programs. Regain Us, www.regain.us, D-U-S, U-S. Again, let me give it to you one more time, REGAIN, regain.us, and BetterHelp.com. These are online telehealth counseling services. And then finally, there are some great books, right? And so the best book is the Word of God and getting some spiritual counseling. But the 5 Love Languages by Chaplin, just go to Audible, look it up. Love and Respect by Edgar Rich, and Boundaries in Marriage by Cloud and Townsend, and The Meaning of Marriage by Keller. And there's a ton more resources that you can read if you're looking at reading about them. And of course, rarely do I pick up a book anymore. I do everything via Audible so I can listen while I'm walking in the morning. And then finally, I am available to assist you as well. EricFrazier.com. I've been in ministry my entire life, served as a pastor for well over 30 years, been married for almost 44 years. It'll be 44 December 19th at 11 o'clock. 44 years of marriage, and I'm happy to support you in your marriage and just talk with you. I'm a personal financial coach, a business coach, and you can read about all of the things that I do at ericfrazier.com, and you can contact me at 714-475-8629. Well, stay tuned, folks, for part 4 of our marriage series, and if you haven't already subscribe to the Eric Frazier Show, available on ericfrazier.com, being taped on the powersnow.com TV, and which you can every day at 10 o'clock participate in the live recording of our shows. And I encourage you to do that. Go to thepowersnow.com and also subscribe there. If you go to ericfrazier.com, you can subscribe to my Faith, Family, and Finance magazine, where I talk about these very issues as well as everything else. and you'll find other services that I offer to families to help them build wealth, strengthen relationships, and plan for the future. Again, this show is being broadcast on the Powers Now TV and the podcast network. You can watch our shows by downloading the Powers Now TV app on any mobile device, or you can find us on Apple, Roku, Fire TV, and soon to be on cable television coming soon. And of course, if you prefer Audible, just go to the Powers Now podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, Google, all the different podcast platforms out there. Thank you so much for watching today. And for those who are live with us today, thank you for joining us and being a part of these live taping shows. Again, every day at 10 a.m. for members only, right here on the Powers Now TV network. Thank you. And remember, we are at our best and we maximize our success when we act now. The power is now.
The Power is Now magazines are the leading resource for real estate agents, mortgage bankers, entrepreneurs, and small home ownership businesses, providing leaders with business strategy information, resources, and tools through PIN, real estate, programming guide magazines. Stay up to the minute with real estate news and information from industry experts. Subscription is free. Sign up today. thepowerisnow.com. thepowerisnow.com.